You skipped it, you dissed it, you said it's a bore. But what if that film's got a little bit more? What if I don't like it? What if it's bad? What if it's awkward or lazy or sad? But what if it's genius, a total surprise? What if it's gold when I open my eyes? We're watching the films you love to avoid. Now sit down and deal with your cinephile void. What if I don't like it? Let's give it a spin. You might hate it or love it. Let's dive right in.
Welcome back to What If I Don't Like It? For the Season 2 finale, I wanted to end on a movie that comes with a lot of baggage. It's Night of the Hunter from 1955. It's one of those films that is constantly called one of the greatest films ever made, and with good reason. It's also regularly described as your favorite filmmaker's favorite film. And that kind of reputation can make it really hard to want to sit down and actually watch it. Because when something is that praised, it can feel a little intimidating. It can feel like homework, or perhaps like something that you're supposed to admire from a distance rather than actually enjoy. And then there's this pressure that if you do not immediately love it or fully understand it, the problem must be you. Well, this episode is for people who have not seen Night of the Hunter or who have avoided it for those reasons exactly. Maybe you heard about it for years. Maybe you know the title, but not much else. Or maybe you are aware that it's important, but you're not sure why, or you're not convinced that it's going to be for you because it's from 1955 and it's in black and white. Whatever reason. What makes this movie especially interesting to me is that it's not always been treated like a masterpiece. I mean, when it first came out, it failed. It confused people. It got written off. And even now, decades later, it's still getting misunderstood, dismissed, or reduced to something that really only film nerds are supposed to care about. And so today's conversation is not about putting this movie on a pedestal. It's more about taking it down and taking a good look at it. And so I'm talking with film critic Carl Gustafson, Carl the film critic, about why filmmakers love this movie so much, also why it works as a genuinely tense, scary, emotional experience, even if you don't really care about film history at all. And so this episode is maybe perhaps not exactly for the deep cut experts, although I do love them. I try to be one myself. This is about lowering the barrier of entry to get new eyes on a film that is still being rediscovered for good reason. So if you have ever thought, I should probably watch this someday, but I'm nervous I will not connect with it, that feeling is valid, and this episode is for you. So let's jump right in and let's talk about Night of the Hunter. Welcome to What If I Don't Like It? As always, I'm your host, Katie Baldessaro, and this is the show where guests take movies that they've decided they might not like, despite not having seen them, actually watch them, and see if they really deserve that reputation. This time we're talking about one of the most important and most misunderstood films ever made, The Night of the Hunter. When it came out in 1955, The Night of the Hunter was a total failure. Critics didn't know what to do with it, audiences stayed away, and it was considered such a disaster that its director, Charles Laughton, an Oscar-winning actor making his first feature film, never directed again. That's how much people hated it at the time. And honestly, even today, it's easy to see why someone might bounce off this movie. It doesn't behave like most thrillers. It's slow and stylized and full of deliberate artifice. The acting can feel theatrical, the tone swings from fairy tale to horror, and the dialogue can kind of feel biblical. If you're expecting realism or a straightforward story, The Night of the Hunter can feel alienating or maybe even pretentious. But the thing is, it's neither of those things. The Night of the Hunter was just really ahead of its time, in a league of its own. It was one of the first American films to boldly use the visual language of German Expressionism, exaggerated shadows, distorted perspectives, heightened performances, and blend them with a distinctly Southern Gothic story. It looks like a dream, but feels like a nightmare. Every frame is composed with painterly precision, and yet it's full of raw, almost childlike terror. As a piece of filmmaking, it's daring. The lighting design alone feels almost theatrical in a way that Hollywood didn't allow at the time. And the tone shifts constantly between poetic and horrifying. It's not naturalistic, it's allegorical. Laughton wasn't just making a thriller about a corrupt preacher hunting two orphaned kids, he was crafting a cinematic fable about innocence and evil and survival. And Robert Mitchum's performance as Reverend Harry Powell remains, in my opinion, one of the most chilling portrayals of evil ever captured on film. It is charismatic, absurd, and terrifying all at once. He's the prototype for the modern movie villain who weaponizes faith, charm, and masculinity. You can see his influence in everything from Cape Fear to No Country for Old Men. And even though The Night of the Hunter was rejected in its own time, it went on to influence generations of filmmakers. Scorsese, Lynch, the Coen brothers, Spike Lee, all of them have cited it as formative. It's the kind of film that teaches you how visual storytelling can operate on a subconscious level, how light and shadow can mean something beyond mood. And to unpack all of that, I am joined by Carl the Critic, a reviewer who is unafraid to ask why a film works or doesn't, who digs into genre films with real curiosity, and who is just as comfortable questioning the crowd's favorites as discovering hidden truths in what people dismiss. He's got a real appreciation for genre-bending films that kind of risk failure in pursuit of something bigger. And Night of the Hunter is exactly that. Together we're going to dig into why the film was so misunderstood, what makes it so visually and thematically groundbreaking, and why it deserves a spot not just in film history, but in your personal watch list, even if you're convinced it's not your kind of movie. Welcome to the episode. I am really excited to be ending out the season on this film. It's considered one of the greatest films ever made, but also a film that is very disliked when it first came out, so it's almost perfect for the podcast. And I have a very extra special guest to discuss this with us. I have Carl the Critic here with us. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Awesome. When we had originally discussed having you come on, we had talked about a completely different film. And I know when we segue over later, I'll talk more about how this came to be. But we had almost recorded on the film Onibaba, which would have been a good film to discuss as well.
Yeah. It's
When I
sitting on
found
my
out you
shelf right
hadn't
now,
seen
ready to
this,
go.
I got excited. Were you familiar with this when I said to you, have you seen Night of the Hunter? Was it like, oh, I've kind of heard of it? Or was it like, I've never heard of this at all?
You know what's funny? The exact same day you proposed this movie, my dad sent me an article about the movie. He was like, have you ever seen this movie before? I was like, I've never seen this movie before. It looks interesting. And then, of course, I also did my video Smash or Pass movie Monsters edition. And one of them was Quasimodo, played by Charles Laughton. And so it was just all coincidentally all around the same time. So it's kind of fated that like this movie came into my life when it did to see and talk about it.
That's so funny. I love when things start to all of a sudden line up where you're like, nobody was talking about this movie from 1955, and then suddenly everyone is talking to me about it.
Exactly.
Well, your dad did you a favor by pointing you in this direction. It was a good choice. But before we dive into the movie, I always like to start with letting our guests talk about themselves, letting our viewers find out more about you, because they might not know you as well as I do. I've been following you on TikTok for a long time. That's how we met. You're also on Instagram and YouTube. But why don't you tell us all about how we can find you?
Yeah, of course. So as you mentioned, you can find me on TikTok at Carl the Critic. You can also find me on YouTube at Carl the Critic, and on Instagram, my film channel is Carl the Film Critic on Instagram as well. I also had a Facebook called Nobody Cares Productions, where I also post reels and stuff as well.
Nice. So no matter what platform people are using, they can definitely connect with you in one form or another. That's how we're, that's the game. Spaghetti
sure.
against the wall, kind of. Why did you start doing film reviews?
So it was actually over 10 years ago. I was in college. I was in college for engineering for film, and I needed a way to make some money. And so my very first reviews were done on hub pages way back in the day. And so I would post like reviews on hub pages and get back when we got comments on that, I got feedback, instant gratification. I was like one of the top film critics there at that time. And then slowly I sort of weaned off of it when I started like focusing on trying to get some work done. And then after college, I had to do a bunch of odd jobs. I eventually joined the Navy and was there for 7 years. And I then started realizing that I was really not happy with being in the Navy. And I was also the biggest cinephile on my submarine, which is what I was on. And so I
Wow.
would start watching more movies. And then eventually people were talking about TikTok. And at the time, TikTok was kind of like a gray area in the military. So I didn't really pursue it right away. But eventually I was like, you know what? This could be a good opportunity for me to make some content because I used to love making reviews way back when. And I can start getting back into that. And so I started like some like lists without my face in it. I talked about Lisa Frankenstein. I think it was one of my first ones. And I was just like, and that one started taking off and blowing up a little bit. And then I started showing my face and talking more and playing around with like features. And then when TikTok was kind of iffy, I then started switching over. I made sure that I had everything on YouTube. So I had multiple places and then was able to play around with YouTube's features. So then like if TikTok went away, then at least I have like YouTube because that's never going away. And so I was
Same.
able to like bounce back and forth and didn't put all my eggs in one basket. I made sure I was out everywhere so that people could find me.
Yeah, that's such that was the game at the time. It makes total sense. I never really thought about that, how using TikTok at the time when you were in the Navy is kind of like you said, like a gray area, but that
Mhm.
was the whole thing that happened with why it almost disappeared, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh, I'm instantly need to ask you because I've never seen it and my husband has been on my case about it. Maybe we'll have you come back on depending on how you feel about it. How do you feel about the movie Das Boot?
I have not seen Das Boot, admittedly.
I
Weirdly
mean,
enough, I have
there
not
was
seen
there was
Das.
part of me that I
I
thought
want
because, you're
to.
on a
It
submarine,
looks.
you wouldn't want to.
It's not that I wouldn't want to. It's just I've never like. There's so many other submarine movies that people play down Periscope like over and over and over again to the point of just.
Do you
And
have
also
a
Crimson
submarine
Tide.
movie you recommend?
So I personally liked Crimson Tide. I think that that's underappreciated. I know that there's a lot of
Okay.
it's a Tony Scott film, so obviously it's not a masterpiece, but I think that there are some aspects about the movie that are a lot of fun. And it's, from a person who's been in a submarine, I could say like there's a lot of things that like it's fun to point out that wouldn't happen on a boat. That doesn't happen. Maybe most people wouldn't think that way because not a lot of people have been on a submarine, but I think Crimson Tide is an
Mhm.
underrated one. In terms of accuracy, I'm not saying this is a good movie, but there was the Gerard Butler movie that came out, Hunter Killer. I would say that that's it's I wouldn't say it's a good movie, but I would say that if you want accuracy for what submarine life is like, that is probably the closest you will get to that. And if you want something zany that's also bizarrely accurate, I would also recommend Down Periscope. Also, can't believe I didn't even Hunt for Red October is my personal favorite submarine movie so
Yes.
far. I still need to see Das Boot and a bunch of other
Okay.
movies, but Hunt for Red October is my personal favorite. That's also a good
Nice,
movie.
nice. I just know with anything that's so niche and so specific, as someone who my husband and I were both fencers, he teaches fencing, I've fenced for forever. Whenever there's a fencing scene, we both like our hearts stop because we know it's going to be wildly inaccurate and like almost offensively inaccurate. So whenever I think of submarine movies, I'm like, oh man, is this even close?
Well, because of there's a lot of things you can't really say about submarines, so it's really hard to make
Mm-hmm.
one that's like 100% accurate. But there
Mm-hmm.
are some that have like good ideas or good things. I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually really really true.
Nice, nice. Well, this segues perfectly right into the first couple of questions that I always ask everybody to kind of expand our knowledge on people. First question I have for everyone who comes on this show is what is the first movie you can remember seeing?
So the first movie that I remember seeing in theaters was Lion King the very first time in like 1994. That was like the very
Not
first,
bad.
like it was the very first cinema experience I had. Uh, Although I don't necessarily remember it, according to my parents, my very first movie ever was Dumbo, the animated film from what they would always put me in a swing set, play a Disney movie, and just like push me in the swing, and I would always be having a good time.
Yeah, I always say remember seeing because again, I am told by my parents the first movie that we went to the cinema to see as a family was The Fox and the Hound. And my sister Kit remembers it. I no freaking memory at all of this. I remember being at home and watching My Fair Lady as the first time I saw a movie that stuck with me. So I think what your brain holds on to is a little bit more important than what is literally the most accurate answer.
That's true. That is very true.
You have a daughter, right?
No, I have no kids.
No? That you for some reason you were talking to a were you talking to a dog when we first signed on?
Pearl's my dog.
Yes, I'm sorry. The way you were talking to Pearl, I was not 100%, and if you hear me talk to my cats and dogs, it does also sound like I'm
They're
talking to
basically our
children.
children,
I was
aren't
gonna
they?
ask yeah, I was gonna ask what the first movie you showed Pearl was. I could tell you what my what my pet's favorite television shows are based on when they hang out with me, which is a weird answer.
Remind me later of this because it's relevant to today's topic. But also, what's funny is that when I was at my house in Maryland, I would be watching like Hell House LLC, and Pearl was just very interested in that movie. She would just like sit there and just like watch intently. Or if there was ever like a dog on screen, or if ever there was a doorbell that rang or a knock at the door, like she would just instantly just bark away. Just like, no, sweetie, it's the movie. It's the movie.
I love that kind of shit. Yeah, apparently cats really like the show John Oliver, and they get a lot of notice about like cats just line up to watch whenever John Oliver is on. One of my cats will love watching Bob's Burgers, so you know they're little people.
They really are.
Carrying on and carrying on in our conversation. Next question that I do have for you is, what movie do you think you have seen more times than any other? And this could be something that is a comfort movie, or maybe something happened in your life where, like, my brother made me watch Sniper 100 times one summer.
So technically, I think the movie I saw the most was Edward Scissorhands, followed very closely
Okay.
by Blue Velvet, and then third place would be Requiem for a Dream. Those are my comfort
You
movies.
win the award for the weird, like, no judgment, but the strangest part. I've never had that caliber of answer. First of all, I've never met anyone who has been willing to watch Requiem for a Dream twice. That is often described as a once and done, a movie that's great, but like, can I watch it twice? Comfort movie. Tell me more. That's so
I
fascinating.
really enjoy it. I see it like almost every year. Like I usually just like, oh, it's time for me to watch a Requiem for a Dream, and like if I'm having a bad day, I'll put that on and be like, oh, wow, my day is so much better now compared to what they're going through.
Okay, yes, that makes sense. It's kind of like the Henry Rollins Crisis Clinic, where you think you're having a crisis, and you come there and he breaks your arm. Now you're really having a crisis.
Exactly.
Man, have you seen Perfect Blue, the
I love
anime?
Perfect Blue. That is, I think that is my favorite Satoshi Kon film. It was the first film I saw
Mm-hmm.
that got me in love with Satoshi Kon. And initially, when I
Mm-hmm.
saw what's that ballerina movie called, Black Swan, initially
Black
it annoyed
Swan.
me because I was just like, "This is so much like Perfect Blue." And then later on, I kind of eased off of that, like more and more because it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's not really that much like it. There's just certain aspects that are very similar, but like Perfect
Yeah,
Blue, I love Perfect Blue.
I do. I think Perfect Blue is one of the really like amazingly perfect animes in my mind, and a great depiction of an unreliable narrator and a descent into madness. I was actually thinking about how people say that Requiem for a Dream contains graphic matches from scenes in Perfect Blue, and like,
The
yeah,
bathtub
there's a
scene, yeah.
similar situation going on there. Yeah, the bathtub scene, and like, I'm glad that you've seen both, because if you like one, I still think you'll like the other. They are very similar to one another and different in their own rights, because fame is the addiction instead of
Mhm.
drugs, to put a
Well,
point
yeah.
on it.
I mean, I've always interpreted Requiem for a Dream as just, it's all about how the American dream, or the Calvinist view of the American dream, is bullshit, which is why each one of the main characters, they're all doing slightly different things. However, it's actually all related, because you have like one character that wants to start their own business. You have one character who wants to be valued for their artistic merits. You have one character that wants to make their mother proud. You have one character that just wants to be on television. And it's just like all of them it's like basic uh Calvinistic idea of the American dream, that you could achieve it if like you had like enough money, blah 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 blah, and then like they're trying to get the money through drugs. So yes, drugs is like the baseline obvious issue of the film,
Mm-hmm.
but like if you dig deeper, it's actually capitalism and the Calvinist view of the American dream.
I do love how at a certain point you can, with almost every American film, be like, it's about capitalism.
It's about capitalism.
It's about capital. Because, you know, I'm also thinking about how you said Edward Scissorhands is another one of these comfort films for you. And I'm like, oh, that is also about the American dream, as often a Tim Burton movie from that time was. But like, these almost misunderstood American dream movies are your comfort movies. That's fascinating.
For sure, for sure. Like Edward Scissorhands and Edward Scissorhams, what the heck, was for a very long time my favorite film ever. But over time, like experiencing more, like it certainly still sticks with me. It's one of my favorite Tim Burton films to this very day. And again, it's also about how we love to exploit the weird and bizarre until we can find ways to, until we can't exploit anymore, and or if we like find something dark about it, which is what many people are like, oh, this guy with scissor hands is amazing, until like possibly committed a crime, and all of a sudden we just hate him now. It was like pre-cancel culture
Mm.
before there was cancel culture.
Yeah.
if,
Yeah, that is
if you
fascinating.
consider that.
Yes, it is. You know, I think it'll come back around, because it's very similar to the Frankenstein story. This thing has been created and then it's misunderstood. It's also not nurtured enough to be educated, and then misunderstood after it's released onto the world. This is a story people love to come back to,
Oh,
because it is deeply human.
exactly. Yeah, I agree. And Tim Burton is hugely influenced by Frankenstein, so that does check.
Check. Last question here. Is there a story or narrative that exists that has not yet been made into a film? It could be a video game that you play, it could be a book that you've read, that you wish was made into a movie.
So I wanted to option the rights to this great graphic novel called 100 Bullets, where it's sort of like an anthology sort of thing, where these people who are down on their luck, but they're approached by a mysterious man who has a briefcase, and like all their problems are based on one person, like that's like causing their issue, whether it's like a boss or an abusive spouse, etc. And like he offers them a pew pew. I'm not sure if you can say actual things, but like it offers them
Mm.
a, that, but it has a single bullet that is untraceable. Like if you use it, you could use it, and like no one would ever know it was you. And I do like that. I think it's like a really great noir story that I feel like could be modernized and could be told today. And I wish it would be like, I've had ideas for it. Unfortunately, I'm not really able to do a lot of filmmaking as of right now, which is life. But I've always wanted to option that and make that into a film.
Oh, that sounds like a fascinating place to start. That's almost exactly kind of how we're we wind up with what we have today, which is a book that gets optioned, noir story that gets optioned into a movie that is kind of both a really true to and interpretive version of it through a couple of different lenses. So nice setup there. I feel you though, even if we had the time, the budget that something like when I think about something that I care about so much that I wish it got made, I'm like, oh, I'm not in the league to get the budget that something like this even deserves. Cause like, can we make it on 2 or 3 grand? How many people owe me a favor? Speaking of which, this film that we're watching tonight, we're talking about today that we've watched already, was made on a $600,000 budget in 1955. I always like to look up the budget of the stuff that we're talking about just to get an idea. I often like to compare it to how many Dusks Till Dawns. That's a lot of Dusk Till Dawns because that was a $19 million movie.
That's like
But
a
at the
million
time,
Robert Rodriguez films.
At the time, the average budget of a film is $300,000. So this movie was like twice the budget of a film should be. Often, so like when you look into why a lot of people were like, it's really artsy and I don't understand it. They also put zero budget into advertising this movie. Like, and in Britain, it got an X rating. So no, people weren't really interested in seeing a movie that was rated X in 1955. Although when you were watching this, did you have any thoughts about like, well, the Hays Code is not totally fallen apart yet. This seems dicey for 1955.
The underwater car scene for sure. I was just like, up until this point, I was like, huh, like, this is like pretty chill so far. And then like there was also that scene where I was like, oh, they went through with that. Wow, and they cut away from it. Makes sense. And then you see her underwater, and it's just like that's awesome. Can't believe they got away. I can't believe I was like, I didn't even know that was allowed to be shown on on screen at the time.
At the time, it's really fascinating. And don't worry about spoiling anything. I always tell people that this is a podcast for people who have also, like us, watched the movie. So we're going to talk about this freely. So no worries about spoiling anything. I did look up, and so the Hays Code was kind of falling apart. And even though this was made with a like person on staff making sure and changing certain things, like it was really important that they made it clear that Harry was not actually a preacher. He was not ordained by anyone. He was kind of schizophrenic and thought he was talking to God. So that there was this like, oh, we're not making a preacher seem bad, even though they clearly were. But it's fascinating that they were able to make this because the Hays Code started to fall apart and these stories were starting to get made. It's really fascinating. The scene you're talking about, have you seen The Shape of Water?
I love The Shape of Water. I think it's one of the great modern fairy tales the past like 20 years.
Yeah. Well, the thing about Night of the Hunter, and I'm sure while you were watching this, you had these moments of like, why do I know that? So many people have been influenced by Night of the Hunter that there are all of these graphic matches that have to be unpacked. One of which being the scene we're discussing, and many of this underwater scene in Shape of Water. And Guillermo del Toro in interviews says, yes, that is exactly a site from Night of the Hunter, and I have been basically chasing that high in every film I've ever made to just try and match this film that I saw when I was a kid because it's so graphically
It's
jarring.
very dark and beautiful at the same time. And yeah, you're right. Like not just that, I was like thinking of like Eraserhead, like the beginning of like Eraserhead was like very similar to like the beginning of Night of the Hunter. I was thinking of Do the Right Things, um uh Spike Jones Spike Lee.
Spike Lee.
The Spike Lee film with like love, hate,
Yeah.
just there were aspects, and I was also thinking about reverse, like the silent horror German expressionist films that it reminded me of as well, including the Count Dr. Caligari, Nosferatu, obviously, like just like
Mm-hmm.
how
Mm-hmm.
exaggerated things were in terms of its lighting and
Mm-hmm.
cinematography. Just, how everything was like at an angle. The uses of like stairs was, that's not necessarily a German expressionist thing per se, but like how everything is at an angle and how people are either higher and lower, and just like the use of that thematically to the story, I thought was very fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the most fascinating interviews that I listened to regarding this was from the cinematographer Stanley Cortez, who says that, like, he's very interesting, but he's not by any means humble. Said that everything regarding the light and the way the camera was set up was him. And that Laughton didn't understand anything about how cinematography was put together because he was an actor, which, credible. He does also go on to say that he believes that Laughton taught him more about the philosophy of film narration and storytelling than he feels he ever taught Laughton on film technique, because he really truly was quite a genius on that aspect. So it was a push and pull. But he does talk about the kind of low-key lighting, and that's like where we have this very stark lighting and extreme angles. And when you're talking about the staircases, the way that those are lit with that low key lighting, that makes it German expressionist. And what's so fascinating is to use such a German and European style of filmmaking to tell an American Southern story written basically by a British guy. It's like, how does this fold together into something that feels so authentically American?
Yeah, I agree with that. I was also fascinated with Charles Laughton at the time. Was known for being
Mhm.
like gay, and like his feelings
Mm.
towards people who were, using religion as an excuse to be hateful. And uh I think especially today, the film is a lot more relevant today. I'm not saying that it wasn't relevant back then, just people didn't understand it back then. But like, especially today, what we see now, it's very relevant in terms of like what it's saying, how people are treating the preacher in the film, as a holy man, even though he clearly isn't. Um, but like they don't really seem that. They just see, oh, man of God, clearly he can do no wrong. What's that? Like
Plus,
this mother of these kids just mysteriously ran away? Well, I'm gonna just believe that at face value.
I got a note. It's fine. Uh, like, he's also incredibly charismatic and attractive. And those like, that's like a trifecta of evil. It's like, if he was just a preacher, but he also looked weird, people might not believe him. But like the wrapping it all up in this very attractive package and then being like, it's still rotten to the core. I think there's a line where they say, they're talking about trees, and the good tree can bear fruit, and a bad tree from its core will always bear bad fruit. And that's kind of how it feels looking at Lawton's character. Like, he's alive and bearing fruit, but that shit is poisoned.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. It also makes me think of like
And
Alfred
that,
Hitchcock, because Alfred Hitchcock does similar things with like his villains. His villains are not
mhm.
necessarily the Wicked Witch or the evil queen from Snow White. They're always like attractive men who like seem pretty normal and outgoing, and then like they have like that dark side to them, for sure.
That's a very fascinating thing to pick up on. Do you think it might be, and they're both British men who are slightly overweight? Do you think that that's a reaction to probably being ostracized for that?
That, you know what? Well, Charles Laughton was Quasimodo.
Also, I think his Quasimodo gave a lot of influence into what we see here with Mitchum. And people have said this in interviews too, that like he understood what it meant to be ugly, beautiful, broken, all of those things folded in. It was fascinating the way that he would direct. And it's such a shame that he never wound up being another director in a different film. He would just let the camera roll and yell at the actors what they should do and then let them go. So there's all this B footage of different takes, and you can literally hear and see how Laughton influenced what wound up being the final takes of the film. It's a fascinating process. It wasn't done at the time because film was mad expensive.
Right. One of the things that fascinated me was definitely the split view. So like they would have something in focus, like kids on a boat and like the background, but like it's in focus, and yet they would have like animals in focus, like in the front foreground. To me, and that technique was used quite a lot throughout the film.
Yes, yeah. And it's eerie. Things like that kind of make it feel like it's not that old. I don't often watch a movie this old without feeling very much like the fact, like, this movie is from 1955. But the subject matter, as well as the way the camera handles stuff, and like you just said right there, this cool technique keeps you really engaged.
And you also see it nowadays. Like I can think of like several instances where like you see that split. I think even in Brian De Palma's films, or very recently there was Us, the Jordan Peele movie, especially like the confrontation at the end of that, where
Hmm.
like you have two characters and you have one in the background in focus and you have like the other one foreground in focus. Just like it's just fun to see those techniques pop up again. And I don't know if was that done before Night of the Hunter.
You know, I was trying to look up all the information I could get on those particular scenes, on the way that that technique was done. I assumed it was done either through projection of one scene while filming the other scene live together, or film composite later on, but I literally couldn't get any information. And I've been Googling for a couple of days, let alone when the first time it happened. If I do find out, it will be added to the errata at the end, but it is the first thing that I noticed, and it is frustrating me how little information. Everybody wants to talk about the one scene with the kids in the barn and the way that that was shot. So it's very hard
Yeah,
to find any information about everything else.
that was also just a beautiful scene just in general. And like overall, like the
Mhm.
cinematography was fantastic, and just the use of darks lights was very important to the story as well. Just, because the
Mhm.
preacher was always in dark colors. When the mother was unalived, she was wearing a white gown. The kids tend to wear a shade of gray. They're still young, so they're still trying to get morality in this world.
Mhm.
They're not quite white, they're not quite dark. They're just somewhere in the middle, which I found fascinating. But then when they find the woman later on, she's wearing mostly white with like specs. You had like the eldest daughter wearing mostly dark gray as she's going to the downtown to talk to boys and stuff. So I just found the
Ruby.
use of shades was very, like, I don't know if you could ever remake this today and not incorporate, at the very least, the themes of like the colors and the contrasts.
Yeah, I was. So when I went to pull this up on Amazon Prime, they've colorized the photo that advertises it, and my heart sunk because I thought, oh God, no, I hope this isn't a colorized version. Because if there ever truly was a film that should not be colorized, it's this film. I've seen colorized Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and it's an atrocity, but like this would be an offense to the senses.
I didn't see the
Man, yeah,
colorized
let
on.
alone modernizing it.
Yeah, I didn't see the colorized version on Prime. I saw the original black and white one, thankfully, and that was very good. We've had conversations about colorizations in film, and it's one of those conversations that pops up, and it's just like, how do we get kids to see these old timey movies? Will make them colorful, and it kind of like ruins the meaning of the scene. You take a woman who's in a black
Mhm,
gown and like standing next to a guy in a gray suit, and like your focus is on the woman with the black gown. You colorize that and give the man a
mhm.
bright blue suit. Now you're looking at the man with the bright blue suit, and like it's so you drawing your eye away from what's most important in that scene. I just wish we just leave those movies the way they are and appreciate what is being said to us in black and white.
Yeah, Cortez, the cinematographer on this, says multiple times that he really, really believed in setting up shots and camera angles and lighting that meant something. Never anything because it looked cool, but because it added narratively to the story. And I get excited nowadays when I see that happen in a film because that's not typically what we get with our movies. We can see that in Coen Brothers films because they are insanely influenced by this film. In fact, almost I think there is one line from Night of the Hunter in every single Coen Brothers film, including the reason why the dude abides is the final line of this film, which is astronomically cool.
I didn't even put
But
that
do you
together
find
until
that
you said that.
Oh, yeah, yeah, when Lillian Gish, the famous silent film actress, the top 17 best actresses on the AFI film actresses of all time, when it zooms out and she goes, "Children abide and endure," that's why the dude abides, that reason right there. Do you find yourself
Wicked.
excited by do you find yourself excited by films like that? Like, do you like the Coen Brothers?
I do love the Coen brothers. Most of their films. There's a couple of odd ones here and there, but for the most part, I enjoy Coen brothers' films.
Do you have a favorite? Put you on the spot, no worries, sorry about that.
Probably Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I think
Great
that
choice.
it's a great retelling of the Odyssey story, and also it's one
Mhm.
of the most underrated musicals of all time. I consider it a musical because it does have music that does push the narrative, and I don't think people realize that it's a musical until I say that, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, it is a." I guess you're right. Excuse me, can I
It's
help
kind of
you?
like Silence of the Lambs, where people wanna be like, "Oh, Silence of the Lambs is like a thriller drama. It's not really a horror movie." Like, don't try and change the genre of the movie because you wanna say you don't like musicals, but you like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Sometimes
Exactly,
there's an exception. Yeah. Ah,
exactly.
fascinating. When we had originally started talking about movies for you, to go back to this conversation, we had picked Onibaba, and I had not yet seen it. So I threw it on and I watched it. And the reason why I said this is an interesting movie, but I think I've seen part of this done ultimately better. We need to watch Night of the Hunter, is because I saw an interesting through line with Onibaba, which you haven't seen yet, right?
I have not seen it yet. No, it's still on my shelf.
Okay. Okay. I'm not gonna spoil any Baba for you, but for people listening to this who are like, "How the hell did they get from Onibaba to Night of the Hunter?" There's a lot of discussion about sexuality for women and the control of religion in that aspect, and how women should be afraid of enjoying sex and enjoying sexuality, and that religion should be used as a false way of controlling them. And I see that here in this movie as well, especially with the character you were talking about earlier with Ruby in her gray dress when she goes to talk to the men, and she's just like, she gets spoken about as this like full of rocks idiot who's going to probably have sex with a man and wind up having children, and how stupid that is, and how women shouldn't realize that that's their role at all, and like it puts so much pressure on the women. How do you feel about the like way women are represented in this movie?
So I think that it's very interesting that you bring that up about promiscuity. And I do think it goes back to like what they're wearing and like how important what they're wearing is to how they are. Like you said, when like of course with Ruby, she's young. So she's just starting out. Maybe she's still exploring sexuality and like what that like means to her. You're also looking at like the little kids, they're just blossoming. They don't even that's not even a thought in their mind, but like they're still trying to understand. They do make the youngest daughter kind of. I mean, she's supposed to be like what, 5 in this movie, and like it's like, I don't. Can't we just talk to the preacher? No, no, stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even Lillian Gish's character, Mrs. Cooper, says to Ruby, like, "Oh, you're not stupid. You were just doing the best you could to be loved with the tools that you had."
Exactly.
So yeah,
It's the
it's
influence that
like,
they have like at the time.
yeah,
I can't speak for anyone that grew up in that time period, but I could like see from there that like how do I put this? the same religious persecution that Laughton felt about his own sexuality, when it came to women, it might have been seen very similarly. Like,
Mm,
just like you should be ashamed of feeling that way or wanting that stuff. But how um I forget the characters in this movie, but the adoptive mother, how she handles it, like you said, she is just like, if that's not your fault, you are just, that's all you had and that's all you understood at this time. And,
hmm.
we can train you to be better, but also know that like based on like your environment and what you've been like pressured into believing based on the society, it's not your I tend to like go with the film, and like I think that like there should be better education for these people, but that yeah. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a wonderful way to get to have these two characters, these dual characters, dual is fresh, the duality of these two characters, where one is obviously light and one is obviously dark. They're good, they're evil. The whole movie is very explicitly black and white, and that's part of the Hays Code, wanting there to be no confusion for us.
Hmm.
But you get to have one, which is the charismatic white man representing religion, and then this older woman representing religion. And the actual one you should aspire to is this woman who's teaching forgiveness even through their stupidity. Even if Ruby had a kid, she'd still take care of it. It's just the circle of life. People make mistakes and they need to learn. Whereas the preacher is preying on people's stupidity and their mistakes to get the better of them, not to teach them anything. And I think to show women in that light in this time period is a wonderful, like, subtle way. And I think you're absolutely right that Lawton's gay, bisexual nature probably led into this. Because although it says that this is written by James Agee, in interviews, all of the actors say that the script that Agee handed in was like 11 pounds. It was too big, too clunky, and that Lawton himself rewrote the entire thing, but they still gave the credit to Agee. So I think that that's probably right, that there's an influence there.
For sure. And also, speaking of religion, I also think that that's also huge in this film for a number of different reasons. Like you said, there was like characters eating apples. There was the story of Cain and Abel. I think that with Ruby, that's the story of the prodigal of the lost son. Technically, if you think about it, like how she's going out in the world and like
Yeah.
she's literally lost part of the time in the movie, and then she goes back to her mom, and rather than like her mom scolding her for being like, "Oh, that's stupid," like her mother is embracing her and being like, "You're home, you're safe,"
Mhm.
you know even though what you did wasn't wrong, what you did was what you had at the time.
Yeah, yeah. Forgiveness despite our own to err is human, so you kinda have to forgive us for being that way.
Yes.
Something that I read about this film that I thought was really funny is that critics say that if you ask, because this film is called the filmmaker's favorite film you probably haven't seen. And in that same article, they said if you ask any filmmaker what their favorite scene from Night of the Hunter is, you will almost always get a different answer because so many of these scenes are visually arresting for different reasons. So, what is your favorite scene from this movie?
There's so many great. This movie reminds me of Beau is Afraid, which is my favorite film of 2023.
Yes. Yes.
In the same regard, it was a it was critically warm received more than this movie was, but it was a huge failure. It had a huge budget. It was an epic for its time. Uh, and like with same with that film, like there's so many great scenes. I think that if I were to do like a top three, the barn is definitely in my top three. The scene in I don't even know if I can do a top three because there's so many. The scene when the preacher is with the mother and like he does that. Her underwater is fascinating. Man, the underwater
Yeah.
sequence I think might be my favorite. just because of how shocking, beautiful, dark, just like it just is the emotional moment for me where like everything else is like this seems like a pretty standard 50s movie, and then like that happens. It was like shit.
I think that that scene is so crucial for that beat where suddenly you realize I am watching a different movie and every single thing that you thought you expected goes out the window and it just starts to go and it builds up the steam. Movies from this time period can be described as having pacing issues, which is another way of saying that like, modern audiences don't really like stuff that's this slow. And sometimes I will admit I'll watch a movie from the 50s or 40s and be like, wow, this is long. And it's like 50 minutes.
For sure.
Did you feel that way with this at all? Or did you feel like as soon as you hit that point, you were like, let's go?
For the most part, no. I would say that
Mhm.
the scenes where like the kids are escaping and they're like on the river might be a little slow-ish,
Okay.
but it does pick back up rather fast when like they go to the other house and they're found. And also
Mhm.
like the scene in the barn was also like another one that was like it picks back up. But then when they're back on the river, it's a little. But other than that, no. I felt I didn't feel the time at all watching this movie. It went by really fast.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, it's only 89 minutes, which is blessedly, that's the length I like a movie to be personally. Unless it's like for some reason it needs the length. I guess Braveheart might need the length. There's a lot of story there. But like this is a good length for me.
I
I
would say I'm sorry to
definitely
interrupt, but I
No,
would
no,
say
no,
that
please do.
one of the things that I would say that if anything, I would say that it happened. Things happened really fast at the beginning. Like 1 minute, the unaliving happens, and he's in jail, and the father's in jail, and then like he's out of jail, and then they're married, and then that seemed a little fast. But I don't know if that's really a pacing issue as much as it is
Mhm.
just as much as it's trying to get all that information in a short period of time. But I didn't think
Mhm.
that I still thought that it still flowed well, even though it was fast.
Mhm. Yeah, and the beginning intro with Lillian Gish's floating head, which does go on to influence a lot of intros, including the intro for Dune. So you're right when you say that David Lynch definitely has said that this has influenced specific things that he shot. And then you have the floating kids' heads. And I do know that that aspect with the kids' little faces was added after the fact to kind of pacify the Hays Code, because starting right with the murder was a little bit too much for them. So they're like, let's try this. And it winds up working very well. But the intensity of the beats did wind up having to be pushed down a little bit. And I think if they had had their way, they would have maybe amplified that even. I do love the way that that kind of contrasts we get these really cool helicopter aerial shots. Like right within the first minute and a half, 2 minutes, I'm like, wait, this is 1955? This is an aerial shot.
I didn't know they had drone shots back then.
This is mad expensive to do, if at all. So
Hmm.
that was it was very interesting to get to see that because a lot of the B unit, second unit shots are all high key, which shows full light and daylight and it's bright. And that really contrasts when we get to the night and we do scenes like the one in the barn where you see the preacher walking by and the kid says the famous line, "Don't you ever sleep." That was actually done with a midget pony and a tinier actor in the distance on a closed set. So that was, again, another really great practical effect. Most of the things in this film
Awesome.
are practical effects. My favorite scene is the scene where she's sitting with the shotgun and outside Harry Mitchum is sitting and he is waiting for her to fall asleep, Miss Cooper, so that he can come in and kill everyone. And there's this really insane intention. And the shade is down. And what we're looking at is a projection of Mitchum onto the shade, but it feels like he's on the other side and we're looking through a window.
Mm.
And then Ruby comes in with the candle and it makes this. They turn off the projection, and so it looks like you can't see him because it's obscured. That's like when a candle is lit inside a room. And then they come back after she leaves and Mitchum isn't on the stoop anymore. It's so subtle and so scary and so
Mm.
fucking technically cool. And I think that that really hits a lot of this movie. Like, as a filmmaker, you're like, shit, that's so cool what they just did.
Also, did you jump when like he appeared like out of that was definitely like I was like there's probably other jump scares before this, but I was like this is probably one of the very first effective jump scares in a horror in a film from way back when.
Like, how old are the two of us? How many horror movies have we seen? How did that jump scare get us? It's
Exactly. Yeah,
why this movie is.
it definitely got me for sure because I was not expecting it.
Conversely, do you have a least favorite scene? I'll break the ice on this. I am not entirely the biggest fan of the scenes with the old lady and her husband. Although I do like how sassy the husband is. Sometimes they broke the tension in a way that I get. It's humor, so hard, so there's a balance and duality, which the whole film is about. But
I think I agree with you there. I understand why they're there and I understand what they're doing. It also plays into that theme of people being caught up in like, oh, well, he can't lie. Like he's a preacher. And like I said before, I was like, what do you mean she just ran off? Well, I guess she just did because he said so. And then, but it also later on plays up
yeah.
like later on, she's like one of the first people we see who's just like, let's lynch him.
Which is very Frankenstein Nosferatu again, to have the mob coming to get the monster. I know we also see Mitchum doing these hands on the staircase, but this like vigilante mob justice is also another thing that you see a lot in monster movies from that expressionist period.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So I would agree with you that the scenes with the old couple might be my least favorite, but it's not by like they're fine, but like they also do drag, like you said.
Any other thing that upset you about the film? I mean, I guess I'm sorry to keep jumping in with this. How'd you feel about Pearl as she only ever does this film, the
Pearl, that
actress
was her
herself,
name.
the little girl. Yeah.
um, I guess she's a kid. They kind of made her too stupid, I think, even for like a 5-year old. But like for the most part, like it's I'm fine with her, I guess. I just think that they could have written her to be stronger a little bit, or a little bit like smarter. Because after the fifth time of asking, why don't we just talk to the preacher man upstairs? Why don't we talk to Daddy? And I was just like, please don't call him that.
Like, she's got a level of obtuseness that lets you know, like, this is never gonna work. You have to move the money. That girl is not on your side. And at the beginning, I think the father even says to him, like, you gotta be in charge of this because that girl ain't entirely bright. The first time I saw this, my niece had not yet been born. Actually, the very first time I saw this, it was in a movie theater during COVID. My friend had rented out the movie theater so that we could all sit really far apart and watch a movie together. Um, my first cat had just died, and like I didn't remember anything about this movie, and so I had to watch it again later. But my niece, who has been born since, talks exactly like Pearl. And so I kept thinking, like, what's with this weird lisp that no child on earth would have? And now I'm like, oh no, she just sounds like Iona.
Exactly, 100%. I agree.
So, it's a little bit grating, but it is naturalistic for what it is worth. What'd you think of the older boy, John, that actor?
He is written very, very smart. If anything, he kind of reminds me
Mhm.
of like the main character of most horror films that is just like something's not right here and just which are mostly
Mhm.
women nowadays, but it's interesting to see a young boy being in that role. He was written rather smart, and I liked how resourceful he was.
Mhm.
And he wasn't
Mhm.
invincible. Like he had moments where he was vulnerable and pinned down, but he was able to use his wits to get out of most situations, which I do appreciate.
Mhm.
And like that he wasn't just a dumb kid. He actually knew his stuff.
Nor was he precocious in a way that felt unrealistic. Like, he had lived an
Exactly.
appropriate amount to have been as smart as he was. I completely agree with that. Did you see the film Weapons that came out this year?
I like Weapons a lot. It's currently my number one film of the year so far, but yeah, I like Weapons a lot.
Do you feel like there's any parallel between the main kid in that film and kind of aspects of our main kid in this film?
Yeah, 100%. Because he's facing with a monster. His parents are gone, both of them, and is replaced with this monster, and he's like trapped in the situation. The only difference is that the kid in the Night of the Hunter actually escapes. This kid feels like he can't escape because there's still a chance to save his parents. But yeah, I do see the
Hmm.
parallels between the two.
I think that they're both written in a way that is that perfect level of non-precocious where like, no, this is what would believe a child who made the decision to try and handle this themselves at that age would do, and that's pretty hard to write, in my opinion. And then you'd said about the character of our young boy John that he was really believable. I think that that's part of why Mitchum's character also works. Like, he's so scary as a monster, but like you can believe Nosferatu is a vampire. I know vampires aren't real, but creatures are, people are, attractive men pretending to be what they aren't are. Um, like speak to the feeling of Robert Mitchum as a scary character in this. How do you feel his performance went for you?
His performance was fantastic. I've always been a fan of his. Even Cape Fear, which is one of my favorite films of him in it. He's been fantastic. And like I've mentioned before, there's a lot of parallels between his character here and what we see in like the political climate today, where people
Mhm.
just want to see they just see a person that represents them and not like the actual monster that he really is.
Mhm.
I appreciate that, and I think that it's extremely relevant even to this very day.
Oh, yeah. And you see it folded into a lot of actors' performances where they're trying to play characters that are truly deeply evil, but are also supposed to actually exist because this is written based on an actual serial killer. The name in the movie is Harry Powell. The name in real life is Harry Powers, who presumably killed 7 people, including an entire family.
Mhm.
So, like, there's this need for this person to feel real, but also feel like a monster, and that's a really fine line to work. I know that, Anton Chigurh from, No Country for Old Men obviously
100%,
has
yeah.
influences of that. Robert Englund's Freddy Krueger, he has talked about how this has influenced him.
I can see that 100%. Definitely.
In fact, it even influenced Robert Mitchum himself when he does Cape Fear. He used this character to get parts of what he put into that performance, which is why when they do it again with De Niro has the love-hate tattoo on his
Yes.
fingers as an
Abs
homage. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you know that this is where those tattoos came from? I didn't the first time I saw this movie, and I was like, "Wait, that's from this?"
Absolutely not. And, like, I've seen it before, like, in Cape Fear, which is one of my favorite remakes of all time, and also Do the Right Thing, which I saw those movies long before I saw this film, and I'm just like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe
Same.
it's taking me this long to see and recognize them, as huge of an influence," and I'm really glad that it did and that this movie is being remembered, especially with that.
It is a little bit of a shame that we wait until after Laughton dies to be like, "Whoa, this is the greatest film ever made."
Yeah. He died, like,
It
what,
does
like,
break one's heart.
these and then, like,
19
afterwards, there came in the Roger Ebert review, and then there became more reviews. It was like, wait, this movie's actually pretty awesome. It's like wasn't a public domain, I think, and then like more people saw it, and they're like, oh, this is actually really awesome.
This
Isn't
is
that just the
actually
way?
pretty.
Like, same thing with Edgar Allan Poe, same thing with Frida Kahlo, same thing with most artists that like their work
Yeah,
gets much more
Van
appreciated
Gogh.
after they're gone.
Yeah, that's the joke is if you are not getting appreciated as an artist while you're alive, get ready to be a great just gonna have to die, but you're gonna be so famous.
Exactly.
Yeah, I I remember watching this and being like, because Do the Right Thing has the love-hate rings on the character, but then he pretty much paraphrases the entire monologue that Mitchum gives. And I was like, oh shit, this is exactly from Do the Right Thing. There's
Yeah,
even a
exactly.
scene in The Simpsons, and because The Simpsons only have 3 fingers and a thumb, so they have 4 fingers, is a scene where Sideshow Bob, no, who is the crazy one who worked with Krusty?
Yeah,
Sideshow
Sideshow Bob.
Mel?
There was Sideshow
Sideshow Bob,
Mel
okay.
later on, but Sideshow Bob is the one that wants to unalive Bart.
Murder. Yeah, it's unalive Bart. Yes, thank you. And he's like lifting weights, and on his 3 fingers is LUVHAT because love hate doesn't fit, but they still put it on there.
Love Hat.
Louvre hot. So yeah, like the aspect to which this reaches deeply and wide into so many films. I think that having watched it now, you will still wind up watching things and being like, "Oh shit, this is Night of the This is just Night of
Exactly.
the
This is
Hunter." Oh my
connecting to the yeah. It's amazing how many films were influenced long after this film came out.
god. Mhm. Well, the only thing that I have left on my outline for us to talk about is the score, which was by William Schulman. And I didn't know this, but he also wrote the theme to Dragnet,
I
which is
believe
like,
it.
huh, I guess I could see that. I can see how that comes over. But what was so interesting about William Schulman's being part of this is that one day on set when they're doing the scene where they unalive the mother, and it's in that like real triangular frame, which you might recognize as a graphic match from Ari Aster's Midsommar. Again,
Yes.
you were right when you said Beau is afraid. Ari Aster is another director who has said on multiple occasions this movie is important to him.
Hmm.
They're setting up the lighting. They're talking about how they're going to put it together. And like Cortez, the cinematographer, is like staring out into space. And Laughton comes over to him and is like, "Hey, what are you thinking about, man?" And this is a story that Cortez was telling. And he goes, "I told him to mind his own fucking business, but you know, we're friends." And then I told him I was thinking about a waltz that I thought would make really cool sense to be playing while we were shooting this, like what it would be in the final edit. And he's like, "Hold on." And then he called William Schulman to be on set while they shot every scene so they could tell him what the scene was about. And then he would write his score specifically to match this, including getting together with the original writer, David Grubb, sorry, to write the song that Pearl sings when they're on that little boat and she's singing about the two flies and the children, that really creepy song. Some fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Everything about this movie was way ahead of its time, including the score. I think that we definitely see influences of the score in a lot of like modern horror movies to this very day, and how important it is to this very day. I think that it was definitely one of the best scores. In fact, I think that the film itself was like the best film in 1955 so far. 1955 was a great year for movies. Night of the Hunter was one of the best, most underappreciated films of its time, and a lot of it is its score, which I was like listening to, and I was like, man, this is like haunting yet beautiful. I would definitely want this either on vinyl, or if it was available anywhere else, I would definitely download it for sure. I would. This is the kind of stuff I would love and appreciate and listen to, like every day.
Yeah, it's really fascinating the way that it fits so perfectly and so beautifully into that theme. Like they kept coming at this story as an idea of, okay, it's a horror story, but sometimes horror is really beautiful. And we have to make sure that that is an aspect of where we come at it, from the lighting, from the acting, from the set, from the sound. If you're someone who likes horror movies, it just feels so wonderful to see that appreciation, right?
Yes, for sure, 100%.
Is there
Like
a horror movie?
Spielberg said that like if it wasn't for John Williams, Jaws would not be as successful as it was.
Straight up, straight facts.
Hmm.
I'm also laughing because I was literally just watching a documentary about Saturday Night Live, one of the writers, and how this writer and Bill Murray wrote lyrics to the theme song to Jaws. It's so stupid. uh, I encourage you to look it up later. But it's such a quintessential piece, kind of like Dragnet is, even for the humor of it. It is something you could easily hum. I often find pieces from this time period, the music can be too much, and so to have the music tailored to this and have it be so beautiful and have it be something that I'd want to listen to by itself without the movie is testament to like, nice job, guys.
For sure, gold star.
When you think about beautiful horror movies, is there one that you would recommend our viewers see where you're like, this one is really gorgeous?
Suspiria.
Suspiria, great choice. Yeah, say some more words. Why Suspiria?
I just really love the style, like both, and I want to be clear, both Suspiria movies for different reasons. They're both beautiful in different ways. I think that the Dario Argento Suspiria being more giallo is more formalistic, is more style and colors over
Mm-hmm.
the substance of the story. In terms of the remake of Suspiria, the complete opposite with a Luca Guadagnino version where it's the story is beautiful, but like everything looks like brown and dark and everything until like it needs to pop. So to this very day, like whenever people are like, what do I want to watch, I show them Suspiria and they're just like awed with the film.
Straight up. Especially if you've never seen something in the giallo like subject matter, if you've never seen color saturation like that. I was reading a fascinating article about how the use of extreme color in modern society has been on the decline for the last 10 years, mostly due to manufacturing plastics where most things come in white or black because it's the cheapest way to do it. But if you go into people's homes, you're starting to see unique colors fade away and everybody's kind of just going for white and black and gray.
Yeah, sad but true.
It's sad, and we'll see that iterated out into our films because our films are trying to like capture the time period, and then like everything starts to become so ugh. And then you look at a film like Suspiria and you're almost instantly overstimulated. It's like every scene is that scene from the Willy Wonka where they're going through on the boat and it's like like
There
holy
ain't no
shit, it's
signs
a
that
lot.
they are slowing.
Yes. Yes. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
That is a great
I was a
choice. Great
90s kid.
choice,
I was
sir.
traumatized by that.
Who amongst us was not?
Exactly.
All right. So as we draw to a close here, any final thoughts?
One of the things I forgot to mention, and one of the things I want to talk, like I think I mentioned Pearl earlier. You asked a question about like, does she get fascinated with movies? I actually watched Night of the Hunter with her, and that was another movie that she sat down and started just, like getting really into as well. I wanted to get into this originally as like wasn't sure if you're gonna ask, how did you feel about the movie? And I was gonna be like, oh, I really hate how much I never saw this movie prior to because this movie is pretty amazing. Um, like compared to the movies of 1955 that year, which included Marty, which I love, Lady and the Tramp, East of Eden, such fascinating, just beautiful movies that came out that year. I think that Night of the Hunter is not only my favorite of 1955, it might be in my top. I'd have to reevaluate like my list, but it would definitely be like in my top favorite films of like all time for sure. And an important one, and I think more people need to see it 110%.
I'm so happy to hear that. I do have to admit, knowing that you are a filmmaker and knowing the films that you like, when you told me you hadn't seen this one, I was like, sometimes I would go and we watch a movie and I'm like, I don't know if these guys are gonna like fried green tomatoes. But with this one, I was like, this is great. I'm gonna get to show someone a film they're gonna love and watch a bunch of times. Um,
Yes.
easy work today. Uh, which answers the question of did you like it? So thank you for that.
Yes.
If you were to review this on a 5-star system, what would you give it?
5 out of 5 for sure. And my
Nice.
normal
Same.
rating would be like a golden heart, which is like basically 5 out of 5. So yeah, 5 out of 5.
Nice, nice. Would you recommend this to other people? And do you have any caveats like I wouldn't recommend this to people under the age of?
So when it comes to recommending movies for younger people, I think it's definitely a trial basis. Like some kids can
Mm-hmm.
handle Nightmare Before Christmas or Coraline. Some kids
Mm-hmm.
still need to watch Casper a little bit or, something a little more chill before they get into something. more darker.
Mhm.
For this film, I would say that definitely have a parent if like you're like a little kid you want to see this movie. Which I don't know how many little kids watch this podcast, but if you are a little kid, ask your parents before you do. But for the most part, I don't see anyone of cognitive age that would not love and appreciate this film. I think that this is really great for. I mean, some people might be like, "Oh, it's boring," blah blah blah, but like, I would say that's at least worth a watch for everyone.
I do think that mostly for this podcast, I throw that on there because I have people who listen who have kids. So if you're like, let's watch Night of the Hunter with the family, which is not a terrible decision, it's a really great film, I might give it a PG-13. And
I
that's
would
probably just because.
for those cases, I would say watch it with your spouse first, if you have a spouse, or if you're a single parent, watch it first, and then determine, can my kid handle this? Well, my kid does love Nightmare Before Christmas. They might be able to handle this. But other than that, like, don't just be like, come on, kids. And then they see the underwater sequence, and then they're just like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you want to put their faces, and then if you want them to remember every scene from this movie for the rest of their lives, then maybe show it to an 8-year-old. But people
yeah.
don't. Especially because the main characters are children and they're fighting pure evil that actually exists in the real world. I think it can be a little too real.
I would say this is he's PG for sure.
If you were a kid in the 80s, our idea of what is appropriate for children is almost worth nothing because we have no idea.
Yeah,
The
just
shit
show
we
your
were
kids
shown.
Labyrinth. They will love it. Or Dark Crystal, like, without any supervision. That's a great idea.
Even the animated stuff like The Secret of Nim, like,
For sure.
it's not really freaking great for kids as much as I love it. But yeah,
I
Dark
love it too.
Crystal, like, what were we thinking? It was a great movie though, but also very hard for children.
Like, for sure.
Yeah. I think that this film I think people will hesitate to watch this film if they have not seen it before because it says 1955 and it says black and white. And that's just scary for people. I definitely think people worry about pacing. They worry about dialogue sounding stilted. There's so much worry. But it is such a unique and different and astounding film that, like you're saying, give it a chance, give it a watch. You might be pretty astounded. And if you're a fan of any kind of filmmaking, you absolutely need to be watching this to see some really cool shit.
It's a must watch. There's some films that like there's even some films that are must watches that even though I didn't necessarily like it. Controversial opinion. I'm not a huge fan of Citizen Kane, but I recommend anyone that's interested in filmmaking to watch Citizen Kane because it's a great textbook film for cinematography. I think that it's
Mhm.
got some really
Mhm.
great direction. It also has some influences from formalistic uh, films such as German Expressionism. So, like even if you don't end up loving the movie, you can definitely get something out of it that will stick with you for whether you are a filmmaker or maybe you just enjoy, or maybe you're just a cinephile, just in general. Like you will get something out of this movie that you will enjoy.
Nice. Yeah, very well said. Thank you so much. And on that note, we're going to cut the episode here. I'm going to thank you again. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, it is Carl the Critic on all the social medias. This will also be in the liner notes. If you're trying to find, you can look right down and you can get all that good information. Please check him out. Hear him talk about more films, all this great stuff. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been wonderful.
Thank you for having me on.
Welcome to Corrections and Omissions. We have a few points from the discussion that deserve clarification or expansion, and this is the part of the show where we love to do that. Not really as contradictions, but as extensions, because with a film like Night of the Hunter, historical context is really inseparable from interpretation, and film history is rarely tidy. So let's just jump right in. The first one is just a straight up correction, though. The score. I misspoke when I was discussing the music. The Night of the Hunter was scored by Walter Schumann, not William Schumann, who is also responsible, like I did correctly say for doing the iconic Dragnet theme. And once that connection is made, the score's effort becomes a little easier to articulate, in my opinion. It carries the same sense of inevitability and creeping menace that you associate with Schumann's television work, except that here it's filtered through hymns and Americana and religious imagery rather than police procedurals. Real life interpretation. Harry Powell was loosely inspired by a real individual, Harry Powers. And here there's just a little bit of precision here. He was convicted of 5 murders, including 2 women and 3 children, though he was suspected of more. I think we said 7. The film is not really interested in recreating those crimes in literal or procedural sense. Instead, it's kind of like an abstract world of violence. It's kind of like mythic transforming of a historical criminal into like the symbolic embodiment of predatory evil rather than like, this is a biopic about that guy. Charles Laughton and directing. We spend a significant portion of the episode discussing Laughton's instinct as a director, particularly how his background as an actor shaped his attention to performance and gesture and moral clarity. What we do not state explicitly is that Night of the Hunter was the only film that he ever directed. I kind of ambiguously say that. Following the film's poor reception in 1955, he never returned to directing. He actually died in 1962 before the film's reputation was fully reassessed, which lends its later canonization as like particularly poignant. This was not the beginning of a directorial career, but kind of like a singular artistic intervention. So you're kind of catching this like rare moment in time. It really is quite unique for that. Initial critical response. When we describe this film as misunderstood upon release, it is important to specify the nature of that misunderstanding. Several influential critics rejected the film outright, including Pauline Kael, who initially criticized its stylization and emotional distance. And like many critics, Kael later revised her assessment as the film's influence and innovation became clearer. This trajectory, early dismissal followed by critical rehabilitation, is central to understanding the film's legacy and is really a key reason why I thought it was great to include it in this show. It's a film that people have historically judged without fully watching and avoided, and they shouldn't have. Release and exhibition issues. We reference marketing problems in the episode, but the film's difficulties extend beyond just, say, advertising. The Night of the Hunter received a limited theatrical release in the United States, and in many markets it was withdrawn quite quickly due to weak attendance. United Artists promoted the film as a conventional thriller. It's kind of a strategy to obscure the expressionist, allegorical nature, like set audiences up for a fundamentally different experience than what they wound up getting, which is always great. People love that. And like it did say in the United Kingdom, it was issued an X certificate, and that's just going to restrict the audiences further and lead to basically the box office performance. And to clarify that financial context, the film's budget was generally estimated between $600,000 and $795,000, which is a considerable sum, like I said, for that period. Its initial theatrical release worldwide made about $10,300, which is a significant commercial failure. This financial outcome directly influenced the studio's withdrawal of support and reinforced the perception of this film as like a miscalculation at the time of its release, despite its later reevaluation. So like, those are your numbers. That's how that goes down. Shelley Winters' performance. We discussed Shelley Winters' character primarily in the thematic term, but her place within the film's reception is really warrants further attention. Winters' performance as Willa Harper was largely overlooked in 1955, and 4 years later she did win the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for The Diary of Anne Frank. She would still later identify Night of the Hunter as one of her strongest performances of her entire career, despite the lack of recognition upon release. So, again, reasons you should check this out. It is an incredible performance, even in the eyes of a very gifted actor looking back at their career. And speaking of great performances, obviously Robert Mitchum's performance here is well worth noting, and we do talk about that. Our discussion of Robert Mitchum really emphasizes his character's like mythic and almost supernatural quality, which gives this like intentional effect. Laughton encouraged Mitchum to approach Powell less as a psychologically grounded individual and more as a like figure shaped by rhythm and repetition and ritual, part sermon, part nursery rhyme. And Mitchum was given considerable freedom to adjust line delivery and cadence during production. He later drew directly from this performance when portraying his character in Cape Fear, which Carl brought up and is the reason for that film carrying forward visual motifs from this film, such as the love and the hate tattoos. Working with child actors. We didn't really get a chance to talk about this in the episode, but I just want to throw it out there that given the film's subject matter, production took deliberate measures to protect the child actors. The performers playing John and Pearl were shielded from the full narrative implications of many of the scenes, and the moments of violence were like explained either in abstract or non-threatening terms. And this is kind of surprising for 1955. You always hear stories about directors doing stuff where like, oh, we told her that her mother died and then we recorded her crying to get a really good take because she's a child. So it's nice to hear that Laughton was a great director to the kids as well. European critical reception. Although the film struggled commercially and critically in the United States, it found earlier recognition abroad. European critics, particularly those associated with Cachet du Cinéma, which you'll know from New Wave from Godard, were more receptive to its expressionist style and moral absolutism. Obviously, that's their jam. And this early international support really played a crucial role in preserving the film's reputation long enough for the American critics to reassess it in subsequent decades. And we just didn't get to talk about that, so I did need to shove that in. Stanley Cortez and cinematography. We cite the cinematographer Stanley Cortez extensively, and his confidence was well-founded. His work on Night of the Hunter is now regarded as one of the most significant achievements in American cinematography. However, Cortez's uncompromising approach, also evident in the Magnificent Ambersons in 1942, contributed to his reputation as difficult within the studio system, which limited his later opportunities. As with the film itself, his contributions were more fully appreciated in retrospect. And I did want to put that in there as well. The river sequence. When we discuss the dreamlike quality of the children's escape, it's worth emphasizing that the entire river sequence was filmed on a sound stage. Artificial fog, painted backdrops, and total controlled lighting were employed to create a deliberately unreal environment. This was a stylistic choice rather than just like, oh, we're technically constrained, we can't film in a river. And this really, for me, reinforces the film's like fairy tale allegory feeling rather than realism, and I love that decision. Institutional recognition. And my last point for this whole, it's kind of like the cherry on top, is don't worry, the film's influence is eventually formalized. Night of the Hunter was added to the U.S. National Film Registry in 1992, and it was recognized as culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. This designation reflects the long arc of the film's reputation. It goes from rejected to neglected to its current status as foundational work of American cinema. And that's it. That's the end of season 2 of What If I Don't Like It? And I just want to say that Night of the Hunter feels like a perfect film to end season 2 on because it is exactly the kind of film that this show exists for. It's a film that was dismissed, misunderstood, and then later reclaimed once people were willing to look at it differently. What a great example. And thanks for spending season 2 with us and engaging in the uncomfortable parts of rewatching or watching for the first time or reconsidering all of the films that we looked at this year. We'll be back next year for season 3, and of course more films that challenge first impressions and easy takes.